Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us for what you can see on your screen is the far too soon election recap. We are, of course, still counting ballots up and down the spectrum from the presidential race to the Senate races to the House races. So I will give you as many answers as I can give you, but of course, this is an ongoing thing. But you know, in the interest of wanting to be as timely as possible, we decided to do this the day after the election and suffer through all the foibles that will inevitably bring with it. I'll start by saying two things. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong notes that I have here. So let's just move along as I find the right one. So do we know who the next president is? No, we do not. We probably won't know until at least the end of the week. If you saw my election preview, if you read any news reports over the last few weeks, you knew that it was extremely unlikely that the election would be called on election night. There were far too many mail-in ballots to make that feasible. And really, for all people's seeming disappointment this morning, on the Democrat side, the timing of the ballot counting is going almost exactly as many pundits said that it would. You know, they said that Trump would get off to this early lead by having the walk-in votes counted. Primarily, it was Republicans that voted on election day, and then those leads would gradually tick away as Biden's votes were counted, the mail-in votes were counted. And that has been almost exactly what has been happening today, much to the chagrin of the president. If you've been following his tweets, he is, well, I won't say what he's alleging, but again, this is almost exactly as how people thought it would go, that he would jump out to early leads in some of these key states, and gradually Biden's numbers would tick up as legally cast votes were counted. And indeed, that has been the case. And Joe Biden, for those who haven't heard, has already received more votes than any presidential candidate in history, about 69.9 million votes. And of course, we are still counting. This is where we are right now. A few states that are too close to call, and the states that will decide the election. Arizona, of course, leaning strongly towards Biden, but not officially called yet. Nevada likely to go his way as well, but we will not know that until at least tomorrow. I was just telling Joy before we started that Nevada is counting ballots currently, but they're not releasing any updates really until tomorrow. They're waiting until all the ballots are counted, and then they'll kind of do it all in one lump sum, as opposed to some of these other states that are launching a little bit here and a little bit there. And we'll talk some more about the specifics of these as we go on. But suffice to say, I showed this slide for the election preview that we did the week before the election. If Biden was worried about a 2016 repeat, it certainly seems as though those fears were founded. I will go into a little bit about the fact that I do believe that at the end of this, Joe Biden will be the next president. However, the massive leads that he seemingly had yesterday morning did not surface. And of course, we'll talk about the Senate and the House races as well. While the votes are obviously still being tallied, here's a look at how Trump is overperforming against the polling averages. These are the averages on Nate Silver's 538 blog, and of course we could have a whole conversation, and likely will, not this group, but certainly one of the main things we'll be hearing about for the next weeks, if not months, if not years, is again about the accuracy of polling. But we'll save that for another time, or better yet, we won't save it for another conversation at all. As you can see, Trump is, at least so far, has overperformed in every state except Arizona. And I'll side note, I hate to say I told you so, but if you saw my election preview webinar, I said that I didn't think Trump had much of a chance to win the state. Now, if you didn't know better, you would look at these numbers, preliminary though they may be, and think Trump won this election. But I'm not telling you anything you don't know at this point when I say that if trends go the way they are looking, and Trump is not able to mount a legitimate legal challenge to the ballots being counted, Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. In all likelihood, Biden will win Arizona, probably Michigan, probably Nevada, probably Wisconsin. He's got a good shot at Pennsylvania. The numbers are still very slow to come in there, and he is way down, but there are literally millions of mail-in ballots that need to be counted in Pennsylvania. And he has a very, very outside shot at Georgia. It would take a bit of a miracle, but he does have a chance at it based on some of the ballots that are still out there and the areas where they come from. we're still counting ballots because the GOP state legislatures of Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin blocked legislation or other orders which would essentially allow processing ballots before Election Day. So it's kind of ironic that many people are screaming, why is this taking so long? Why are these ballots still being counted? When in fact it was the state legislatures in those states that did not allow those ballots to be counted prior to Election Day. That is why some of these things are taking so long. But again, Biden now leads in Wisconsin with almost no path for Trump to overtake him in the state. He's up by somewhere in the neighborhood of 20,000 votes. Indeed, right before this webinar began, Trump's campaign called for a recount of Wisconsin because they have essentially finished counting there. It's a little ironic that about an hour ago or 2 hours ago, Trump was tweeting that they needed to stop counting these ballots. And now his legal team is tweeting out that they need to be completely recounted. But we'll see how that goes. As you know, Jill Stein in 2016 called for a recount of Wisconsin because she thought she had been shortchanged, and it actually resulted in 150 or so of her votes going over to Trump. So it's possible Trump gains votes from this, probably not enough for him to win Wisconsin. Like I said, Biden leads Wisconsin. He leads in Michigan. Most outstanding votes in Michigan should be favorable to him. They're coming from cities and counties where he should win that are Democratic strongholds. Biden again leads Nevada with only mail-in votes from yesterday, and a lot of them yet to be counted. I have heard this election described as watching a baseball game with the innings out of order, and it's a fair assessment. At this point, we can see for all intents and purposes how this game is going to end, but there is going to be a lot of work and a lot of interesting maneuvering to get there. And it's important to remember there's nothing to dispute or litigate in terms of ballot counting. I alluded to this a minute ago. We just had record turnout, almost certainly in the middle of a pandemic, which is a good thing. And many of the votes haven't yet been counted, which is perfectly normal. And of course, those votes have to be counted. They're legal votes, and they should be counted. And of course, before we get into the meat of this, it was as expected an election of extremes. If you look at New Mexico has become the first state to elect all women of color to its House delegation. By the same token, if you look at North Dakota, a die-hard Trump-supporting, and it's a bad pun, a die-hard Trump-supporting Republican in North Dakota named David Andal won a seat on the state legislature, not the U.S. Congress, mind you. He won a seat on the state legislature, and David Andal passed away about a month ago because of COVID, rampant COVID in the state. So those might be the two most extreme examples in this country of things going one way and things going another. One quick other top line, and I apologize I'm talking so much, but the fact is with very little time to digest and turn all this around, I frankly didn't put together that many slides. But it seems like the Republicans will hold the Senate. We're going to have at least one runoff in Georgia, maybe two, and we'll get into that. But that blue wave, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. That blue wave really didn't come together last night. The race in Iowa wasn't even that close. It seems that Susan Collins will stay the senator of Maine, Tom Tillis in North Carolina. And that will obviously create an interesting but not impossible situation for a President Joe Biden, but we'll get to that. So let's talk about last night, and as it so often does, it starts with Florida. Democrats started off the night with a bad taste in their mouth as results started coming out of Florida. To be clear, Biden didn't need to win Florida, obviously still doesn't. In many polls, wasn't expected to win Florida. I didn't expect him to win Florida. And after this election, I think you really can't even consider Florida a battleground state anymore on the presidential side of things. As you heard, if you watch the results come in, there is clearly a massive Democratic problem in Miami-Dade County, but it's not the whole story in Florida. Even if Biden had pulled off the same margin in Miami-Dade as Hillary Clinton had in 2016, he would have still lost Florida by 170,000 votes. The issue is it's broader and it's deeper. Biden underperformed Hillary Clinton in 54 of Florida's 67 counties. But Miami-Dade has at least temporarily become solid red. They voted out Donna Shalala, Congresswoman Donna Shalala, a one-term congressman who was not only the Secretary of Health and Human Services under Bill Clinton, she was a former president of the University of Miami. She's entrenched in the area, but the heavily Cuban population of Miami-Dade voted her out, as well as another one-term Democratic congressman from the area, and turned those seats red. But let's, enough about Florida. Let's talk about the other battlegrounds that we went through on our last webinar. And a lot of this is review because, again, Biden doesn't need all these states. If Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin hold the way that they are going, Joe Biden is president. So as I said in the last webinar, Biden would do very well in Arizona. Mark Kelly would win the Senate seat, which I don't think it's official yet, but he certainly seems like he's going to. It's not also not official, I should add, that Biden has pulled this out and has not been declared yet. It's interesting to me that as Florida goes solidly red, Arizona is going reliably blue. That it just seems to be the way the state is trending. Not just because of obviously COVID had a big part of this, and a very unpopular senator in Megan McSally had to do with this, but it's been going that way for quite some time, turning more and more blue. As of now, the last remaining statewide elected Republican will be the governor. And even he is not the most popular person in the world. So again, not a terribly huge surprise that that Biden pulled this off, or at least so far. But certainly a bit of a surprise of how blue Arizona is getting. North Carolina, not quite as blue as I would have thought. Trump looks poised to take it, barring the count of an outstanding balance. Tom Tillis, it appears, will remain the senator there. There are still a lot of votes to count. A unique part of this election that we're looking at is there are, I think, 287,000 ballots, outstanding ballots, but these are not ballots that necessarily can be counted. There were ballots that were mailed out, and they have, I believe, until tomorrow to return them. But it's unclear as to how many, if any of them, will be returned. Again, you're allowed to send it in up until that time, but those are just ballots that are out, not necessarily ballots that will come back. It would take a lot, I think, at this point to shift North Carolina. Not something that I think, certainly not one that Biden needs. It's more Cal Cunningham, the Senate candidate, would like. But speaking of which, but we'll see. There will be a lot of postmortem on this Senate race. As you probably know, Tillis's Democratic challenger, Cal Cunningham, got caught in a sexting scandal. He refused to say if there were other affairs that he needed to disclose when he was asked by the media. I doubt, as I said in the last webinar, that was too big a factor. Certainly polling indicated that people didn't much care about it. But again, polling will be questioned a lot in the coming weeks. The real takeaway is the state is just not yet as blue as people thought it was getting. And a lot of questions to answer as we move forward with North Carolina in terms of the postmortem on this election. A lot of vote counting still to come in Pennsylvania, but again, this favors Biden, even though Biden doesn't need this state to win election. These stats are from about 9:15 or so this morning, and of course, ballots have been counted during that time. The only place, as I said, not currently releasing information, by the way, is Nevada. They'll talk about what they've got, these ballots that they're counting today. That information will come out tomorrow. Pennsylvania is releasing information as it comes out county to county. If you're following it online, and you know, if you're as big a nerd as I am and you're following it online, I will say that there's a big disparity between the overall state totals and the county's totals. If you're looking for accurate vote counts, the county websites are usually the best to go to. The states are having a bit of a lag updating. So if you look at the state total, it still looks like it's a pretty sizable Trump lead. But if you go county by county, that lead is shrinking as the day goes on. But I digress. Again, the way this has played out was well predicted in the states that count the in-person ballots first. A heavy jump for Trump on election day, followed by slow pushback for Biden. It was exactly the opposite in North Carolina, by the way, as you may have seen. Biden and Cunningham jumped out to big early leads, which then evaporated as the day went on. So lots to be counted in Pennsylvania, but a lot of folks, including the Senator Bob Casey there, saying that this is going to break Biden's way. Certainly the evidence there would suggest that. I will confess I was a little surprised at how one-sided Iowa was. As a whole, Iowa was an absolute blowout for Republicans. They will maintain full control of the state government. They will significantly expand their majority in the Iowa House of Representatives, their state house, that is. Senator Joni Ernst dispatched Teresa Greenfield with minimal difficulty. Cindy Axne is going to be their only Democrat member of Congress from Iowa. I mentioned in my election preview that Joni Ernst's unpopularity would be a drag on Trump. If we're being honest, I predicted she would lose, and I'm very wrong about that. It wasn't her unpopularity was not a drag on Trump. It wasn't even a drag on her. She won this race easily. Iowa has always been a very tough place to poll, and this year that was front and center. None of the early polling really got this exactly right. This was never a state that Dems had confidence they could win, but when the more and more the talk of the blue wave kept going, the more Iowa seemingly came into play, but clearly it never was. It was a sound defeat all around by Democrats, which I think you will find a bit demoralizing for Iowa Democrats. Again, it sure looks like Biden will win Michigan. As of now, he leads Michigan by more than Trump won it by in 2016. That margin will only grow as absentee ballots cast by Dems come in through the day. Again, those are coming from mostly Democratic stronghold districts. Yet to be determined in Michigan is the Senate race. The incumbent Senator Gary Peters was on the Republicans' target list, and with the exception of Doug Jones in Alabama, who of course lost, he was probably the easiest to pick off. I don't think I've got a slide for that. No, I don't. So, but it looks like Gary Peters is going to pull this out, especially as these new ballots come in. Of course, these same absentee ballots will favor Peters. The same ones that favor Biden will favor Peters. The other thing to think about here is if Biden can win these remaining states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, it makes any sort of legal challenge for Trump even tougher. As I said, he's asked for a recount in Wisconsin, which based on their constitution, he's got the right to ask for. But the more Biden ekes out these small victories in places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Wisconsin, Arizona, the harder it is for Trump to mount a true legal challenge. You can maybe challenge one state if it's going to be the one to get you a Biden over 270. But if he's 2 or 3 states over that, it's going to be very, very tough to mount a legal argument against that and challenge that in court. So it'll be interesting to see how much more swings towards Biden over today and the rest of the week. Back into this, and by the way, if you've got any questions, if anybody has any questions at all, please do type those into your chat box. If you want to certainly engage in a conversation with me, tell me why I'm wrong, tell me you for different, please do that. I want this to be as interactive as humanly possible. And certainly things are changing by the second, so if I'm saying things that have been proven false, or if you're hearing different things and you're in one of these states, by all means weigh in, let me know, ask questions. Would love to engage in a dialogue with folks. So back to the Senate, again, the Dems had some very high hopes going in that are not going to come to fruition, to say the least. They may still get to 50-50, but that would take winning not 1 but 2 runoffs in Georgia, and one of which might not even come to a runoff. I think I've got a map here somewhere. There we go. This is a map from just this morning, and I don't think anything on it has changed. First and foremost, if you're looking at this, Alaska will stay Republican, which gets you to 48, 47 on the Republican side. Maine and North Carolina, as we've said, likely to go Republican, even though they haven't been called yet. So there you're looking at 50 to 47 in favor of the Republicans. And I'm obviously being, for those being picky, yes, I know Bernie Sanders of Vermont and Angus King of Maine are technically not Democrats. They're both independents, but they caucus with the Democrats. So we're going to call them Democrats for the purpose of this argument. It's easier that way. So again, 50 to 47 Republican, not a sure thing, but let's say Gary Peters keeps Michigan. So that's 50 to 48 in favor of the Republicans, which leaves not 1 but 2 Senate seats in Georgia. One of those Senate seats has already gone to a runoff because no single candidate got 50%. A congressman named Doug Collins jumped into the race, even though Kelly Loeffler is the incumbent. She was appointed to take Johnny Isakson's seat after he retired. Bit of a surprise that Collins jumped in. Of course, to have 2 Republicans in there created a bit of a weird dynamic on this, and as it turns out, led Loeffler to not being able to get 50%. So she will have a runoff against the Democratic candidate. That will be in January. I won't even try to make a prediction on that race at this point. I will say that traditionally in special elections in Georgia, it's easier to get Republicans back to the polls 2 months after folks have already voted. But this will be a very, very different kind of election. I mean, if it's 50 to 48 in favor of the Republicans and the Democrats know they have a chance to at least break even, they're going to do an amazing amount of get out the vote work in Georgia to try to win those 2 seats. So that one is definitely going to a runoff. The other one may go to a runoff if and only if the incumbent Senator David Perdue ends up with less than 50% of the vote. That could still happen. As I've said, there are a lot of votes still to count in Georgia, especially in some of those Democratic strongholds. But it might not happen. either way, David Perdue has actually been a big champion for our profession, especially when it comes to VA and military issues. So that's where we are on David Perdue. Again, as these votes come in, if he drops below 50%, it'll be another runoff between him and John Ossoff in January. I think it's December or January. I can't remember when it is, but it'll be later this year, and you will hear all kinds of things about it. So if the Republicans hold that Senate and Biden hold those Senate seats, they will have enough of a majority to beat any sort of a tie, assuming that Biden wins the presidency. If it was 50-50, obviously Kamala Harris would be the tiebreaker, but it doesn't look like it's going to go that way. They should have a 1 or 2 vote lead as this goes forward. That said, they'll only get that lead for a couple of years because they have a massively disproportionate number of senators up for re-election in 2022. 2022, the Republicans will be defending Iowa, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Florida, North Carolina, Wisconsin. But I think there are ways, and I don't want to jinx anything and go being overly optimistic. There are ways I feel like that even though Republicans will have the lead in the Senate and the majority in the Senate, and we're looking at a Democratic president, I do believe that there are things that they can find ways to work together. McConnell and Biden have a fairly amicable relationship. They've worked well together in the past. McConnell wants to do another COVID package. I think that Biden would be amenable to that and getting that worked out. Infrastructure is always in the mix. I mean, through the Trump administration, we constantly heard of infrastructure packages that never quite came together. It is a considerably larger possibility under a Biden presidency with a Republican Senate. And I think there are things that are less ideological than other issues that they could work on writ large. The first sign I think that you'll see, assuming again that trends go the way they're going, Biden becomes president. The first sign that you'll see that Biden is looking for an amicable relationship with the Senate could be cabinet picks. If you are thinking bipartisan cooperation, maybe you don't see Elizabeth Warren chosen as Treasury Secretary, as she almost certainly would have been if this had been a Democratic landslide. So if Biden is picking people who are a little more middle of the road for those cabinet posts, making sure that they get through that Republican Senate, it will speak to a little bit more of an amicable relationship that they're trying to get through. Just for fun, I'm going to throw a prediction your way right now. You see I've got Chuck Schumer here listed as vulnerable. That may or may not be true. He is up for re-election. He will absolutely, no question, be challenged in the primary by someone on his left in New York State. That will happen, sure as you're born. So if you're Joe Biden and you like Chuck Schumer and you want Chuck Schumer to remain in the Senate as minority leader at that point, assuming that they don't win the Senate, as a leader either way, you want to do him a favor and you want to appeal to the far left at the same time. So maybe what you do is you appoint Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, the other senator from New York, to a cabinet position, and she is certainly qualified to do any number of cabinet positions. So Kirsten Gillibrand is named to the cabinet, and then obviously a presidential candidate who dropped out and endorsed Joe Biden. So all the more reason why she should be chosen by Joe Biden to be in a cabinet position. Takes her out of the Senate, and then you have Governor Cuomo appoint AOC as the senator from New York to finish out Kirsten Gillibrand's term. AOC, who is almost definitely going to be the one that challenges Chuck Schumer from the left in that Senate race. It kind of kills two birds with one stone. AOC might not go in for that. She definitely likes the idea of taking a run at Schumer, but she might want to do it kind of on her own merit, so to speak. But it would seem like a situation that would work out for everyone. Chuck Schumer gets to stay in the Senate without much of a challenge. AOC gets to the Senate to try to push them to the left a little bit more. That's a little prognostication by me, may or may not happen. I will say I told you so if it does happen. But let's talk about our champions. I listed these on our last webinar. Mark Warner, John Cornyn, Bill Cassidy, all winners last night. Mark Warner was declared a victor literally as soon as the Virginia polls closed. Almost immediately he was declared the winner, as was Cassidy. Cornyn took a little bit longer. He had a pretty good challenge from MJ Heger, but eventually pulled it out. Those are our three big Senate champions. The rest of them are up in 2022, and we'll be talking a lot more about these folks as the years go on, and we'll be looking strongly at those challenges and the way the political landscape changes before these folks are up for re-election. I don't want to go too far into the House. There are a lot of races still to be called, but suffice to say, last night definitely did not go the way the Democrats thought it would. In fact, it's been interesting on social media, even as it becomes increasingly clear that Biden will win. There's just all sorts of doom and gloom from Democrats because this was not the clean, one-sided whooping that they thought they were going to get. Everyone had this perception of this blue wave, and all of these Republican-leaning districts were going to get wiped out, when in fact, by and large, it's been the opposite so far. Again, Donna Shalala in what had been a previously solid blue district, or so everyone thought, in Miami-Dade County was wiped out, as was the district right next to her. A few folks in New York, in the what had become Democratic-leaning members areas of New York, folks like Max Rose, they're going to lose. So if you saw my pre-election webinar, you know I said the Dems would probably pick up at least five, and as many as 15 seats. That's definitely not going to happen. In fact, they're probably going to lose a little ground. Still have a majority. There was never a question of that. But they are definitely not going to have that huge build that we thought they were going to have as of yesterday morning and going into this election. Most of our champions emerged unscathed. Again, Max Rose, who has been a great champion for us on veterans issues, will lose. Tom Suozzi in New York. Matt Cartwright, another guy who's gone to bat for us. Matt Cartwright, for those of you who have been working with us on legislation for a while, know the Wounded Warrior Workforce Enhancement Act. Matt Cartwright was the Democratic lead on that bill, so we are losing him likely losing him. He hasn't lost yet, but it probably is going to happen. So a few of our champions, but many more of our champions, as you see, won. And of course, a new Congress brings a whole new group of people that become champions. You know, we're already working. Literally last night, we were having conversations with folks that we thought were going to win throughout this week. And certainly into next week, as some of this the election fervor dies down, we'll be getting to know these new candidates on Zooms and things like that. I might be reaching out to some of the folks on this call, if you live on those districts, to get you on Zooms and in meetings with folks from their campaigns as they get ready to come to DC. Because we need to engage these folks. That's the number one thing we need to do as these new members of Congress take office, is tell them about the profession, let them know what it is that we do, distinguish how what we do is different from other medical professions, and illustrate that we have very unique needs as a profession, and so that takes a lot of education. We're not going to get that done in one or two meetings, so we'll be looking to you for some help on that. We will talk a lot more in depth about how the House shook out, and certainly by then we'll know a lot of things. By then, actually, we'll know. December 16th is 5 days after the current continuing resolution ends. As folks know, there was a continuing resolution passed to fund the government on October 11th, I believe it was. That funds the government through December 11th. So when the Senate returns, when the House and Senate return sometime next week, they will need to figure out what they're doing to continue to fund the government. McConnell actually mentioned an omnibus today, which seems like a laughable impossibility. They would have to do a ton of work to get a large-scale appropriations bill done. My guess is with Republicans maintaining their majority in the Senate, they'll just pass another long-term continuing resolution to fund the government into next year, and then work on it when they come back for the 117th Congress. And right there, off the bat, is another way they could promote some community with Biden, is to get a long-term appropriations bill done on his watch. So, that's a very broad overview. Again, we're still in the midst of this. A lot of votes to be counted. I wouldn't expect a formal winner of the presidential contest to be announced until tomorrow after Nevada has counted. There are a couple paths that Trump still has, and his campaign privately has acknowledged that they really only have a couple of ways that they can make this work. One of them hinges on Nevada, so they'll be looking closely at that. But we always knew this was going to be a horse race, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next couple of days. And again, we're just going to be engaging with all of these new faces that come to Congress. It's a very exciting time to do what I do for a living, to have all these new folks coming to DC so we can educate them and get them on our side. And again, we will need your help to do it. So I will stop there and see if anybody has any questions or comments. We were right at 1:30, but if anybody has any questions, thoughts before we wrap up.
I'm not seeing any questions right now, Justin, but I think we're all going to hold you to your predictions, especially I am on the AOC Chuck Schumer play. I figured that was who you were talking about, and I certainly would be interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, she's going to come at him. She's absolutely going to come at him. So it's easier for her to get in there in advance. It would work out for Gillibrand. It would work out for Cuomo. It would work out for her. Again, the only way she wouldn't do it is if she decides, I want to get there on a vote. I really want to see if I can take this guy out, which is a possibility. She's a fighter. It could happen. But if someone offered me a free Senate seat and I was as enthusiastic as she was, I would take it. But we'll see. We'll see.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions. So thank you, Justin, for your insights.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon. Appreciate it.